of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion to approve the correspondence listed on D. We'll make a motion.
So moved.
Any discussion?
Read the open public meeting act.
She said you have to. Yeah.
Oh, we did.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes
So
for
moved.
August.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's approved. Any old business? Okay, I'd like to make a motion to open to the public.
Second.
Okay. If you are wishing to speak, there are yellow cards on the table. If you fill them out and hand them to Stacy, she'll forward them.
Cute haircut.
Nicole, I hope I pronounced your last name.
Yeah.
Ianetti?
Anu.
Anu, sorry.
Hello. I wanted to discuss busing and aides for special ed. I just wanted to start by saying I have previously requested a one-to-one aide on the bus for my kid 4 times. And it either, it was never even brought to an IEP meeting. It was told that whatever excuse was given at the time, and then it was just blatantly ignored. So from what I understand, the law in New Jersey is 1 aide for every 15 students on the bus. The law seems okay, but if you're familiar with special ed, in reality, that just doesn't work. When you're talking about the MD program, we have the lowest functioning kids on the district, multiple on the bus, between 5 and 7 on the bus. The autism program, they're all kind of mixed in. However, if a child has a one-to-one aide in school, then from the moment they leave my possession and come into yours, they should have a one-to-one aide. They leave my hands in the morning to go on the bus. They come back to me off the bus. If they require a one-to-one in their IEP, they obviously need it. When they get on the bus, there's 1 aide per 5 to 7, 8 kids. I can't see how this functions on the bus if the kids that require a one-to-one don't have one. There was an instance last year, and I know that the aides are trained on blocking and generic defenses against different types of conditions with these kids, but every kid is very different. My kid in particular doesn't speak. She doesn't know sit down, stay. She doesn't understand basic commands. If the bus were to get in an accident, I understand that they are supposed to stay on the bus until help gets there. That's not always a case. If the bus was on fire, how do you get the kids out the bus? If the bus was in a crash, they don't understand that. Now you have 5 to 7 kids all having a meltdown at the same time with an aide who has no idea what to do. Last year, I had told the aide on several occasions, my daughter can't go to the top of the step. She can't go down steps by herself. She put her at the top of the step. My kid fell. She fell in the street, flat on her face. This year, she gets on a bus. It's a bigger bus. I was told she's supposed to be the second to last, or the second drop off, second to last pickup, so she has minimal time on the bus. She was getting home 50 minutes after school started. We live 2 seconds away from Birch's. It's been resolved. She got on a new bus this week. But for the first couple weeks of school, she was on the bus for 50 minutes. It wasn't a 5-minute ride. The last day I had her on that bus, I could hear her screaming from inside my house on the bus. My husband had to physically get on the bus and carry her off. She had bite marks up her hands. Her hand was black and blue. She was kicking, screaming. She was a disaster. The aide on the bus flat out said to my husband, I have no idea what to do with her. That's because these aides are not properly trained on each child. I understand there's more logistics to having every one-to-one on the bus, because whether it's budget or whatever it is, but if there's a way to keep her aide with her all day long, starting from the bus to the end of the bus, they would report to transportation instead of reporting to the school, and it would keep them with her all day. They know her. I mean, any of these kids would benefit from that. It would help with your shortage of staff at busing. I know there's a shortage of drivers, aides. If you already hired an aide to be with a kid, that would stop your shortage because that aide is already hired. It would also help with them knowing the child, where if there was an emergency or they were stuck on the bus, or even if they just had a random meltdown, and if you had 2 kids having a meltdown at one time, who does the aide help? If you had 3 kids, because one triggers another one that triggers another one, who does the aide help? If they have a medical problem that aide is not aware of or doesn't know how to fix, how do they help them? A 5-minute ride could be a 40-minute ride, could be a 50-minute ride. Or a 5-minute ride, they can have a total meltdown and come home self-harming themselves. It doesn't matter how long they're on the bus. So I just wanted to bring the attention that it's something that's needed with these children, and if there's a way to figure that out, I know most of the parents that are in this situation would appreciate it, or even if it's looked into and how to logistically have that happen. I know that a lot of aides complain about pay, and that's something the aides in the classroom and on the busing, they get paid squat. And I understand you're not going to pay them benefits if they go into overtime, but a long time ago, I was told about the job sharing program in Township. So maybe that could be revisited so they get some extra cash. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just address a little bit of what you said, and I'm not making excuses, I'm just speaking reality here. So with regard to the assignment of an aide to a special education student for a bus, that's usually done by way of an IEP. So that would be written into the IEP that the student has an aide, a one-to-one aide or whatever it may be, on the bus. With regard to your concerns, they've now been heard here in public. And the only thing I could say is that we're going to look into everything that you just talked about, and I will have a discussion with Ms. Miller, who's the assistant superintendent and is in charge of special services, to try and determine what can be done, if anything. With regard to your proposed solution about the aide getting on the bus, staying with your child from transportation in the morning through transportation in the afternoon, that makes perfect sense. However, there are association contracts and certain time frames for working and things like that that have to be followed, to the extent that, and I'm not saying that that's applicable here to your situation, but I'm saying that's a concern that the district must consider, that is sticking to the contract with the association or whatever association may be involved with the aides, and to the extent that it's needed, there could be some flexibility by way of additional negotiations with the applicable association. So I'm telling you all of this to say that this is everything that we're going to be looking into to try and see if there's a way to address some of the concerns that you brought this evening. So thank you.
Mary Bem?
Hi, good evening. I was talking with somebody, and we were discussing knowing that the budget's going to come up, and one of the questions, and she's much better at asking these than I am, she wanted to know from Dr. Hibbs, what are we doing over the next month to gather information to get our financial outlook pulled together? Do we know where our credit rating is with either Moody's or Fitch? What does our financial outlook look like, our future financial outlook for the next year? what about our weaknesses in districts, staffing? Is any of that going to be pulled together and provided before the budget's put out? And that was within transparency, just kind of for the public to know. And then another thing in transparency, I haven't been, I was not last meeting, but the meeting before that, and there was a lot of people here because of, I think, the grading system. And somebody was talking and reading text. So I know that became an issue because I watched last week's meeting. And I thought we'd take it away as a positive, right? Because other people have read text while they're here, not pertaining to what was going on. And I was talking to someone else, Patricia Klein, and she said, because my idea was, why don't we make this transparent? During COVID, people were able to ask questions over the internet, right? We were able to submit questions, and they were answered. Maybe not all of them, because the meeting goes on for a while, and who knows how many people are going to be out there in TV land. Chances are, people will start tapering off as the school goes on, and things only, if it's like a big, interesting thing or a lot of people watching. But why don't we go back to being transparent? People are watching online, and they can submit questions. Maybe have a limit, the first 5 questions. Somebody over here, maybe feed them over to the president who's in charge at the time, and they read the questions, but also be transparent and give the names of the people who are asking them. And then Patricia said in Voorhees and in Cherry Hill, they're doing that. They actually have it where you see the person from home asking the questions. So I think it's something that we should revisit and maybe look at and open it to the public. I mean, people maybe can't come to a meeting. They have a newborn child and they can't come, or maybe they're taking care of children, or maybe their husband's not home, or their spouse, shouldn't say husband, spouse isn't home. There could be a lot of different reasons. Maybe it's an elderly person who just has a really important question to ask. Sometimes when they're submitted in writing, we don't always get a response. I mean, the idea is that we're going to get some email response, but we don't. So this could be an avenue for somebody else in the public to reach out, and it goes with transparency. So I think maybe that's something you guys can revisit and look at. I mean, it wouldn't be harmful. It's not hurting anything. And we can just learn from something that there are other people that have questions that need to be asked. That's what I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Mary. Patricia Klein.
Can I answer?
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Sorry, Dr. Hibbs.
Yeah, no worries. I'll take the first part. So we've already started, Mary, in this process. We've had numerous meetings already to talk about our financial outlook and where we are. The state aid reduction, I think, is in the neighborhood of about $200,000. Is it $200,000? $300,000, as opposed to the $1.5 million that it's been in the past, which, while significant, is much more doable than the $1.5 million. So what we will do is that as a district and across every department, we will talk about our needs and where we are and what each department has and needs to forecast, not only for next year, but over the next few. We've already started this process with Dr. Nathan and Mrs. Gerber through curriculum. And then we're going to engage in budget discussions in the upcoming months. So I don't know the financial rating. Is that?
I don't know that off the top of my head. Usually, you have to get that updated if you're issuing debts. We haven't done that in some time. Yeah, that's when that's super important.
But we're already engaging in conversations to make sure that we're being fiscally responsible and knowing that there's a lot of needs. There are a lot of needs. So we're engaging in an energy audit, which we're hoping will get us a lot of energy saving cost measures and hopefully millions of dollars, hopefully, into projects. But if you look around, there's paving, there's concrete work, there's air conditioning. We're a massive school district, so there's just a ton that we need to do over the next few years. You're welcome.
Patricia Klein.
Good evening, everyone. I just want to start off by painting or giving a scenario. When I graduated from Drexel University, my first job was with Xerox Corporation. Then I went to work for Ford Motor Company and Dow Chemical. And it was based on performance, how I received my bonuses, my pay increases, my promotions based on performance. And that meant if I didn't turn in reports, I didn't do what I was supposed to do, I got a 0. I didn't get any promotion. I didn't get a 60. I got a 0. No increase in salary. And the reason I say this is because we're faced with a situation where a report was due on September the 1st. The superintendent's goal report was due September the 1st. In your contract, the superintendent, it says, the executive superintendent of the county has to receive your goals no later than September the 1st. I noticed that on the agenda, we are voting on your goals. And that says, and that is actually in section, I think it's I, under the superintendent. We are voting on your goals tonight, and I'm wondering, why are we voting on your goals? The deadline was September the 1st, not October the 1st. So I have a concern there. The reason I'm really concerned also is that we had a you said 300,000 reduction in monies, but we also have a reduction in students that are attending. I did get a chance to look at the salaries of the superintendents. Let me go to that. And the average salary for a superintendent in the state of New Jersey, dated August the 27th, 2023, the average is $193. The lowest is $157, and the top is $233. That's salary. That's not merits, no bonuses or anything. The bonuses are based on your goals. If the goals were not received, why are we paying bonuses? We should not be accepting those goals. You should not be voting on those goals. Our superintendent, based on decrease in numbers, decrease in reduction of monies, salary, $215,000 plus additional monies when they meet the goals. So I'm asking that you do not vote on this because it's already expired. September the 1st was the deadline. Thank you.
Board members, I would just caution you with regard to any comments or responses that you're going to provide to Ms. Klein's statement, to the extent that anything that you say could be considered to be evaluative of the superintendent, and therefore I would suggest that to the extent you'd like to say anything, that you just measure your words, because we have to steer clear of evaluating our superintendent or engaging in any personnel matters in the public without the consent to do so.
Can we address the date?
Yes. It's the issue that you sent it to the county superintendent.
No, I mean, you're just not correct on the date. It's September, it's the end of September. It's not September 1st. It's totally incorrect. Ma'am, I'd be happy to, the date for the goals to be approved by the ECS is the end of September. That's just what it is. I mean, I spoke to the executive county superintendent 3 times this week.
I have a question for the attorney. Are we obliged to follow contracts?
Are we obliged to follow contracts? Yes, to the extent that we've entered into contracts and there's been no modifications or amendments to the contracts, yes, you're obligated to follow the contract.
Thank you.
Adam, can I comment maybe on the process that we went through with the superintendent search and how, like, compensation related into that? From a general perspective?
Generally speaking, yeah.
Yeah, okay, all right. So just for transparency, right, we hired an outside firm because none of us are experts in hiring superintendents, nor what we should be paying superintendents. That firm gave us guidance on where the ranges were, where they thought we would need to be relative to attracting good leadership to the district. We looked at relative compensation of candidates and things like that. But I think a lot of us weighed heavily on not having them make the decision, but giving us input and recommendations. I would say the data that we heard and saw was different than some of the numbers that you quoted. That seems pretty low compared to what we saw. So that's part one. Part two of the performance goals, from a personal standpoint, because I don't want to talk for the board, but having something out there that the superintendent has to achieve to get that money, to me, was attractive, and that incensed that person to do well. You're not just going to come here and show up every day and get, if you want to get big money, you got to perform. So for me, that was attractive as part of the package.
Second, a comment as well. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm still not clear on what you said about if it's September 1st and you said it's the end of September.
Yeah, the date as per NJDOE guidelines is that they have to be approved by the ECS, the Executive County Superintendent, by the end of September. That's just what it is. It's the end of September when that has to be all fully approved and executed.
I have some concerns with the goals, but I don't know if I'm allowed to expound upon them or just vote on them, yes or no. Like you said, you don't want it to be evaluative.
Right, but to the extent that the board is going to be voting to approve goals tonight, it would be appropriate for you, Mr. Ross, to make your concerns known during the discussion portion after a motion's made.
Okay.
Wouldn't that have to be done in executive, though, if we're going to talk specifically about merit goals?
We're straddling a gray area because it depends on what the specific goal that Mr. Ross has a concern with, what that is and what that's about. Depending on how deep or where that conversation goes, it may be more appropriate for executive.
So would that be something that we should maybe have him tell to you, and we decide whether we got to go into executive for that? I mean, we had a big, long executive discussion on this last week where we created the goals and came up with
Yeah,
it.
to the extent that Mr. Ross has a concern about a goal, I think that it would be the best use of the board's time and the public's time for him to just maybe speak to me on the side. And then from there, depending on what the concern is, I'll make a suggestion to the board as to whether or not those concerns be held in public or in executive session. However, also please note that I don't believe that Dr. Hibbs has been riced this evening. So to the extent that we need to go into executive session, that may be problematic as well. And also, to the extent that any of those goals that Mr. Ross would like to discuss are more appropriate for executive session, having not received a rice notice, it's up to Dr. Hibbs as to whether or not we're going to be discussing that tonight at all.
Comment on the rice. I had said before that all administrators should be riced because at any time we could talk about them, which may turn into being evaluative. But I don't know why we don't rice all administrators. They could be talked about any time, and you're telling us now if we have something to say about them, we can't because they should have been riced. And I brought this up with Harry when he was here, but I guess it went nowhere.
So the only person that can rice the superintendent is the board president. That's it. The board does not rice staff at all. The board cannot rice staff at all. The only person that can rice staff is the superintendent, and that's it. So to the extent we're going to be talking about the superintendent, the board president would issue a rice notice or direct the business administrator board secretary to issue a rice notice for the superintendent. That has not been done, to my understanding, and therefore it would not be appropriate for us to go into executive session absent permission from Dr. Hibbs this evening to go into executive session. He just hasn't been riced. So I can't, in good conscience, tell the board all systems go ahead into exec and speak about Dr. Hibbs, because that would be violating the rights requirements.
Can I ask a follow-up question? Would it be appropriate for all administrators to be riced every meeting?
In my experience throughout the state, I've never been involved with a Board of Ed that rices administrators routinely as a preemptive measure to the extent that the board might want to discuss an administrator. I've never seen it done. Is it, if the question, Mr. Ross, is that possible? Yes, it's possible so long as the superintendent is willing to issue those rice notices, because he's the only one that can.
to follow up from Mr. Liberty's comments regarding the search committee. Yes, indeed, the board put forth an attractive salary for the annual salary. The people that were involved in the search committee did not talk about merit goals. Okay, that is done in terms of contract. And just to reiterate, thank you for your comment, Adam, that a contract is a contract, and procedurally, we need to follow it. Thank you.
Correct me if I'm wrong, we were originally doing this process with the interviews. We did discuss merit goals during those interviews, just so we're clear, and I know you were there. We did discuss merit goals as well as merit pay for successful completion of said superintendent goals.
The other thing is that we all voted on the contract. Everybody received a copy of the contract beforehand.
Not all of us.
Well, those of us that were on board at the time.
That's my question. We're going to follow the contract. Thank you.
Tim Greco?
Hi, everyone. I guess the topic is timely as far as the board goes. Dr. Hibbs, it's good to meet you, and I'm looking forward to getting to know you. I'm a long-time listener, first-time caller. My wife and I watch every week, so I'm going to ask for some autographs at the end of the session. My concern is, and I like to keep up with things. We have 4 young kids in Township. One of the things that, when we first moved here, which was years ago, we moved here because of the school system. And it's been a tumultuous last couple of years, as our kids get into the school system. But I'm confident that we're at a very important point as far as turning a corner. And I know that there's some new faces, some older faces, not age-wise, but, existing faces, we'll say. We have a brand-new superintendent. I have a lot of faith in Dr. Hibbs. But I do think that this is the most important time for us to put in place these goals that we need to make the township successful. Because we have a challenge where, I think that there's a lot of good stuff that comes from the board. At least I hear a lot of good stuff that comes from the board. And I think that we have a lot of good frontline teachers. But I think that there's a lot of messaging that's getting mixed up, or at least not being properly delivered in the administration, in between the board and the teachers. And I think a lot of that has to do with goals. And the concern that I have is, I briefly read these goals. Dr. Hibbs, I apologize in advance. I'm going to pick on you. Again, I apologize. But these aren't goals. These are mission statements, or quite possibly job descriptions. When you look at these things, ask yourself, how are you going to measure the success or the progress towards these particular goals? And I look at this, and I'm going to look at this because it's short. The superintendent will place a strong emphasis upon WTPS school safety and security. This will involve implementing our current district practices and researching new possible practices. How do you measure that? How do you measure progress towards that? How do you know if you hit it? And the problem is that when you look through the rest of these goals, just about every single one of them, and Dr. Hibbs, it's not just yours, it's the district goals. I didn't get a chance to see what the board goals were. I didn't see them earlier today, but I could have missed it. But if they're vague like this, I'm going to suggest that you don't vote tonight. And I'm going to suggest that you go back and make it measurable. Make it a way that you can actually say, yes, we're actually progressing towards this goal. Or yes, we've met this with specific criteria. Because without it, we're going to have continued miscommunication and misdirection between you guys, who I think are doing a great job in a real tough environment, and our really awesome teachers. And I think that in between there is really where we need that guidance, that goal, those goals. So, thank you.
Any comments?
No.
Kevin, and I will mispronounce your name, so. Kevin D.
Duke is the last name.
Duke, thank you so much. Thank you.
You guys hear me? Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kevin Duke. For the record, my last name is spelled D-I-D-U-C-H and pronounced Duke. I wanted to take a minute. First off, Dr. Hibbs, it's nice to see you. I don't think I would take your job for anything. If this is a fresh start for you here, welcome. I don't think we've ever met before, but it's certainly not a warm welcome from what I'm seeing here. A lot of angry faces, a lot of discouragement, and when I hear about the goals, I actually originally did not plan to speak on the goals. I had a couple other things I wanted to talk about, but as I hear the goals, I think to myself, well, what are these goals for? Because they're not for anybody's ego, right? They're not for the adults. They're for the kids and the progress of the kids and the administration and how the administration and the schools can better progress the progress of the children. That's what these goals are for. It's not so that one person can point to a deadline and say, well, you didn't make that deadline, and the other person, well, so what? If we don't make the deadline, then what happens? What, we fire Dr. Hibbs and we go out and do another round robin search for somebody else? Do the goals get done then? I don't think so. So I would ask everybody on the board who maybe is concerned about this, remember why you'd be concerned, and also remember who you're being concerned for. Because I'll tell you, if the goal is to get kids excited in education, I have a 7-year-old daughter who is stoked as anything to go to school. That's one heck of a goal in my eyes. And what I would like to express to the board is my appreciation for Herfield Elementary School and the system that my daughter Sarah is being put into, which is super positive, super reinforcing, not perfect. In fact, I just had a conversation with Dr. Switzer last week that was probably constructive. I think she'd call it. I think I would call it constructive, but progressive. We worked out an issue. We had something come up. We worked it out. Tremendous credibility, and thanks to her for her professionalism and the way she handled it. I'm usually, I'm an attorney, so my wife's Italian. It's the reason why I became a lawyer. I wanted to win an argument outside of my house. So to kind of come after Dr. Switzer at a moment where I could have, it could have gotten worse than it needed to be. The reality is the yelling, the fighting gets us nowhere. Calm demeanors, conversation, progress, remember the goals. Speaking of goals, I wanted to point out the positive behavior support program that Herfield's recently instituted. I reached out to the PTO yesterday because I wanted to be able to support the program. I did make a donation to the group to sort of hope to foster that because I think it's a fantastic thing. Those are goals in my mind. That's important to me as a parent. I hope that the board recognizes that where I come from is a place of positivity. I want to support and help you all, and I know you all want to support and help me, your volunteers, especially the board members. I didn't see you get a check handed to you when you walk out the door here. Of course. So the reality is, guys, I really appreciate what you do. I appreciate what you're trying to do, Dr. Hibbs. I certainly appreciate Dr. Switzer and what she's doing. It's a great environment for my child. And if you wanted to say to yourself, hey, have we met our goal? In my eyes, you have. Thank you.
Are there any other cards? Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Scott.
Thank you. I appreciate your comments, and I appreciate your comments as well about measurable goals, and it is a challenge. I mean, we all struggled with what to come up with for goals, and even just to agree on the buckets. I'm glad we got agreement on those buckets. One thing with measuring of goals is you have to have data. And I think one of the things that we've been talking about is, and one of the goals that we have, is getting that data analytics in place so that we can start to measure a lot more, but it's not something that we can do overnight. So I think hopefully you'll see positive steps that we're getting towards that, to where we can start to have measurable goals and start to be able to see where kids are having problems and use those analytics to really hone in on the problems and come up with corrections. And then we did talk about using our committees to try and measure and see how we're doing against those goals, so that as we're looking in the committees, are we achieving on the fiscal responsibility one, or in IA, are we making progress against the academic goals? But, short of that, I mean, if there's other ideas, I think I myself would welcome ideas you have on measurable things, but it's a struggle, and I think we're trying to take steps to get there.
Thanks, Scott. Are there any other cards? Okay, I'd like a motion to close to public.
So moved.
All right, I'd like to make a motion to approve the report of the superintendent, items 1 through 5.
So moved.
Are there any questions or comments?
Just discussion.
Discussion.
So just, I want to be clear, on number 5, the superintendent goals, those are not the merit goals that, I just want people to recognize that, because you might look at those goals and be like, oh, those are the superintendent goals, that's what the superintendent's merit pay would be judged upon. That's separate. That's a separate document that goes to the county superintendent. So I know there could be some confusion on that, and I thought it'd just be good to clarify that.
Just a quick question or comment. I know that we talked about that some of the things got left off of our board goals, and so we were just going to reiterate them. Okay, the first one up is the safety and health environment, and it's supposed to read, create and maintain a safe and healthy environment for students, staff, and visitors. We recognize that a safe learning environment is paramount to the educational practices and well-being of our students and staff. It's supposed to also read, monitor and maintain the safety and security protocols, and to promote, support, and maintain a positive behavior and mental health plan. Those were the things that were supposed to be included.
So before you move on from that, did we just amend that, or?
Yeah.
Okay, and I think somebody else mentioned that something was left off of theirs.
Yeah, mine.
Go ahead, Steve.
It's to read, support staff and administration in efforts regarding analysis of data, including but not limited to NJSLA, Linkit, and progress monitoring, along with the implementation of programs and plans to identify achievement gaps and increase academic achievement and student performance. It was just, and student performance was left off.
Got it. So, I'm sorry, is there a motion pending currently?
Yes. Right. No, you didn't call it
I
yet, right,
did
did you?
call it.
Okay.
So I'd like to make a motion to amend those board goals to include the information that was left out. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay.
Stace, what was your, and even the last 3 words, and student performance?
Yes.
Thanks, Eddie. Eddie's giving me the nod.
Any other comments? Okay, motion carries.
Do we have to
All
roll
right, so
call
we
that?
need to take a vote on,
Hold on. Ellen, do we have to?
We need a roll call. Need a roll call.
yeah, roll call on report of the superintendent, numbers 1 through 5.
With the amendments.
With the amendments added, thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Baker?
Yes.
Ms. DeMayo?
Yes.
Mrs. Gallinaro?
Yes.
Mr. La Liberty?
Yes.
Mr. Lindsay?
Yes.
Mr. Tomzak?
Abstain for number 5, and yes to everything else.
Mr. Ross?
Yes.
Mrs. Clancy?
Yes. Motion carries. Okay. Motion to approve numbers 1 through 3 for instructional affairs.
So moved. Second.
Any comments or questions? Okay, roll call. Roll call.
Wait a minute, I don't know, I can't hear you. Mr. Mayo? Yes. Mrs. Gallinaro?
Yes.
Mr. La Liberty?
Yes.
Mr. Lindsay?
Yes.
Mr. Tomzak?
Yes.
Mr. Ross?
Yes.
Mrs. Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Clancy?
Yes. Motion carries. Policy second reading, items 1 through 6. Have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Any questions or comments?
Just had one. On K4, I pointed out something that was old and needed to be struck. Did we get that amendment in?
Yeah, it's struck, yeah. So Sean, Sean was awesome, didn't even have to talk to him, he just read the agenda. What Scott is referring to in Regulation 5513, care of school property, it says something in there about an online system that really hadn't been a discussion point that we took out.
Great.
So it's struck, yes, sir.
Thank you.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Gallinaro?
Yes.
Mr. La Liberty?
Yes.
Mr. Lindsay?
Yes.
Mr. Tomzak?
Yes.
Mr. Ross?
Yes.
Mrs. Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Mayo?
Yes.
Mrs. Clancy?
Yes. Make a motion to approve student activities communications number 1 through 4.
So moved.
Second.
I have a comment. Glad to see that the Washington Township High School cheerleading practice facility is at no cost. So that's a great positive thing. Any other comments? Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. La Liberty?
Yes.
Mr. Lindsay?
Yes.
Mr. Tomzak?
Yes.
Mr. Ross?
Yes.
Mrs. Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Mayo?
Yes.
Mrs. Gallinaro?
Yes.
Mrs. Clancy?
Yes. Motion to approve human resources, items 1 through 44.
So moved.
Second.
Any comments or questions?
Yeah, just a couple comments here. A couple of retirees, I'd like to give them a little recognition. One being Ms. Elena Lester for 25 years, so congratulations. And also Mr. Robert Hines, celebrating 26 years in our district, so thank you for your service as well.
Any other comments? Roll call, please.
Mr. Lindsay?
Yes.
Mr. Tomzak?
Abstain from initials PN, AM, and SG on M1, and yes to everything else.
Mr. Ross?
Yes, abstain number 1.
Mrs. Baker?
Abstain to number 1, yes to the rest.
Mr. Mayo? Mrs. Gallinaro?
Yes.
Mr. La Liberty?
Yes.
Mrs. Clancy?
Yes to all. I'm just sorry about the one.
Oh, thank you.
Keeps everything running.
Okay, motion for finance and facilities, items 1 through 33.
Second.
Discussion? Yeah.
A comment to make. Number 33, the contract reads September 1, it's past September 1. Procedurally, that's a concern. We have a lot of different units in our that we negotiate with. Language in the contract cannot be changed or altered without meeting and making an amendment. And to my knowledge, none of that occurred. Thank you.
Roll call?
Hold on one sec.
Go ahead.
Adam, is that something do you have access to the contract to confirm that for us? No, I'm asking Adam.
I do not currently, as I sit here, have access to the contract.
You want to see it?
Is there a question for me about it?
I guess the question will be, we're being asked to vote on it. We don't necessarily have access to the contract, right? We're being told that it's September 30. Even if contractually it was September 1st. I guess what would be the implications? Are we putting ourselves in harm's way if we approve it and it was contractually September 1st?
So the board can do whatever it wants in terms of whether or not it wants to hold to the plain meaning of the contract, or whether or not it wants to offer some flexibility. If you're going to ask me what is the downside to following the contract, well, the downside is you're going to have a superintendent who's not happy. And if you, what is the upside? Well, you're essentially carrying out your end of the bargain, despite the fact that the dates may not line up, in the way that it's written in the contract. Some may say it's form over substance. Others may not. And it's really each individual board member's decision as to what they'd like to do. Obviously, if the board were to approve it, that's a tacit admission that the board is okay with everything, despite the fact that the dates may be somewhat off. Mr. La Liberty, if you're asking me if the district can get into some sort of trouble or the board can get into some sort of trouble, I'm not a betting man, but if I was, I'd bet no.
So I'm just going to go out. So I've been told it was September 30. That's what you were told by the county superintendent. I know my personal intent was to get these goals in and approved in on time. I think we did a good job of trying to get that done. I'm happy with the way the goals are, so my vote will reflect that.
And I think we spend a lot of time, talking about what the purpose of our job and what the purpose of everyone here is for the students. The point is to have these goals, our goals, Dr. Hibbs' goals, everyone's goals, to be what's best for our kids. That's what I'll be voting on. I'm not sure what's going on, I'm not sure what's happening, but I'm not digging it. But nonetheless, we're here for the kids, and let's do what's best for the kids, period.
Thank you, Stacy. All right. Roll call?
Full disclosure, I have to abstain because
Right.
of my vote.
Have to state on merit goals, does he?
Yeah. He has to abstain, or he should probably choose to abstain. I can't tell him he must abstain, but he should certainly choose to abstain if he wants to avoid issues down the road.
Roll call?
Mrs. Baker?
No to 33 based on contract language, and yes to the rest.
Mr. Mayo?
Yes.
Mrs. Gallinaro?
Abstain on item 6, initials KG. Yes to the rest.
Mr. La Liberty?
Yes.
Mr. Lindsay?
Yes.
Mr. Tomzak?
Abstain from number 33, yes to the rest.
Mr. Ross?
Yes, although I have some questions on 33, but the votes are there, but for the sake of continuity, I'll say yes.
Mrs. Clancy?
Yes. Motion passes. Okay, make a motion to approve special education, items 1 through 9.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Okay, roll call.
Mr. Mayo? Mrs. Gallinaro?
Yes.
Mr. La Liberty?
Yes.
Mr. Lindsay?
Yes.
Mr. Tomzak?
Yes.
Mr. Ross?
Yes.
Mrs. Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Clancy?
Yes. Motion carries. Motion to approve negotiations, item 1.
So moved. Second.
Discussion?
Ms. Spector?
I sent you an email. I had a question. I know there were some questions that were outlined here from people, but I didn't see my question. I had asked, how many staff are we talking about, and what's the total amount of money that we're going to be spending for that? We did that last year. We basically were told how many staff are going to be utilized throughout the year, and what was the amount of money that would be budgeted. Of course, there was the caveat that if at some point you might have to come back and ask for more money, that come back to the board and ask for more money. So I don't believe I got that information.
So this is for class coverage. I believe when we calculated numbers last year, it was for the Pride Lunch, which was a little bit easier because we know exactly how many people. The class coverage comes into play when, and you've probably seen on the agenda, I think we might have had staff members who volunteer to give up their prep or lunch if necessary to cover a particular class period. So it comes into play if the building is short of substitutes and we have to pull staff members on their free period to cover. So that we can't measure how much that's going to happen over the year. It's just a difference in where it's coming from the budget.
Okay, that makes sense.
If we pay our staff members, it's because we're short a sub, so we wouldn't be paying a sub.
Yeah, that makes sense. Did we actually sign off on something for the lunch? Because I thought there was some mention with that lunch period that we would be utilizing staff and paying them for time in the cafeteria. Are we not spending any money at all like we did last year? That would be great.
For covering lunchtime? I don't know the answer.
I believe we'll have some, I don't know how much.
Okay, so why I'm asking, last year we ran into a problem with coverage, and the schedule has been changed this year. And my question is, what does that look like? What's the reduction in coverage and costs from what we paid last year? If you don't have that information now, maybe next meeting.
Yeah, we'd be happy to do that for you. It's really kind of hard for you to ask a question at the dais and have it be a complicated question and not give us any time to calculate that. So, I mean, we spent time today, probably Scott had some great questions, Dave had some great questions, and Elaine had some great questions. So I didn't get copied on that, so I would have made that one of our great questions to answer. So moving forward, if you wouldn't mind, just send that to me, and I'll be happy to try to flesh it out if we can squeeze it in, if there's enough time. We'll be happy to get that information together for you.
I apologize if I read the email wrong. I thought I read that if I, as a board member, or any board member, had a direct question for HR, to go to Mr. Sweeney, right directly to Mr. Sweeney, or find.
I'm not telling you can't do that, I'm just simply saying.
We need to comply.
Yeah,
Okay, all right. I just want to make sure I'm following the directions.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, roll call.
Mrs. Gallinaro?
Abstain?
Mr. La Liberty?
Yes.
Mr. Lindsay?
Yes.
Mr. Tomzak?
Abstain.
Mr. Ross? Mrs. Baker?
Yes.
Ms. DeMayo?
Yes.
Mrs. Clancy?
Yes. Motion carries. Any new business?
At one point. So one thing that's come up, just public comment, was about holidays and the Yom Kippur.
Yep.
I just wanted the public to know we do have a policy on that. Right? We have policy 8210, which is about the school day. There is a provision in there that talks about religious holidays, and there's a list of them put forth by the
by the Department of Education.
Department of Education, right? And I was surprised as I dug into it. There's like 150
150, yeah.
holidays in there. that if it is one that a student observes, they can an excused absence for that. And we discussed that. I think we're going to put that to committee as well to look at that and see.
Absolutely.
And I think we should maybe even put it towards IA, from what I'm hearing. Yes, the kids would get an excused absence, but there were tests and quizzes and projects, so now they're behind, and, that's not, exactly fair. So we can bring them maybe to IA, how to, navigate that.
Yep, we can certainly do that.
Right. I think we should also look into the fact that during those holidays that there's not supposed to be homework assigned and major quizzes assigned, so that's something we definitely have to talk about in IA.
Dr. Nathan, you have that?
Have we ever, as a district, had off on the Jewish holidays? I know some districts do. I just didn't know if we ever in our, I shouldn't be looking at you because you're, but.
I think she can look your way. You have
Sorry to
it.
put you on the spot there.
In the past, we have had them off, yes.
Okay, just one.
Weren't the days negotiated by the teachers' union?
No.
The calendar committee usually.
No, I mean for this district. The calendar isn't coordinated with the teachers' union?
I know that there's a calendar
Yeah.
committee.
Yeah, there's a meeting, but the number of days, there's nothing contractual about giving a holiday off. So if you wanted to give off Diwali, you could do that. Or if you wanted to give off Yom Kippur or Rosh Hashanah, the days. That would just run, the respectful thing to do is to filter that through the calendar committee. But in the end, you have to approve the calendar. So it's your calendar.
Okay. Any other new business?
Yeah, I just want to make a comment, Mr. Ross, that with days off with teachers, you negotiate the number of days that you work, not the particular days. For instance, our teachers only get paid the days they work. They get paid 187 days. If they're off a week at winter break, they don't get paid. It's only for 187 days. They don't get paid holidays. The days they work is the days they get paid.
Gotcha.
Other units might have holidays, teachers do not. I do have some new business. I'm going to put it on a new business. I had to leave temporarily, and by the time I came back, you were at public comment. I would like to read a statement, okay? I missed the last board meeting, and I'd like to address some misconceptions that have been circulating regarding the text messages that I shared at the 8/22/23 board meeting. This is an effort on my part to be transparent with you and the public that I represent. The first day of school for the staff in September of 2022, Interim Superintendent McGee and Interim Principal Farrell put the administrative grading policy of 70%, 30% on hold for the school year of 2022-23. As a result of teachers' concerns, it was established going forward, teachers would be involved in the discussions relative to grading. At the August 15th board meeting, I raised the question when discussing the first reading of the proposed new grading policy, 70%, 30%. I asked, were teachers involved? At the August 22nd board meeting, there was a robust discussion regarding the grading policy. Teachers voiced concerns at the meeting and in writing to the board about the substance of the policy and not being involved. I have lived in this community for 46 years. My daughter attended Washington Township schools. I served as PTO president at Chestnut Ridge. I served as a coach in Parks and Recs and worked for over 30 years in our district. A lot of people know me as their representative serving on the board, on the school board. During the meeting on 8/22/23, I received 2 text messages from 2 different people. I did not have a back and forth with these senders. What I did do was try to be transparent and open to the board, to the public, by announcing what I received. since I felt the questions were germane to the discussion. I think at this point, I'm going to let you know what the questions were. Person number one, the 60 isn't there in the first semester for every assignment, just for the semester grade. Person number two, what is the time frame? How long can they take to retake? What if they don't show? Can a 0 be given then or a 60? These individuals, the individuals who sent the text are people I know personally before becoming a school board member. These individuals wear many hats. They were watching and asked questions. You need to hear me when I say, I did not know I was doing anything wrong. My motivation was just being responsive and trying to make the discussion productive and transparent. President Chilla immediately interjected that I shouldn't be texting. Our attorney remained silent. I was not texting, but referred to the text questions out loud. I was wrong, and I own my mistake, and it won't happen again. As a matter of fact, at the board meeting prior on 8/15, Board member Stacy DeMayo announced out loud she was receiving text messages. It is important to note nothing was said about not texting during the board meetings by Mrs. Chilla or the attorney, either at the meeting or followed up after the meeting with the board. I say this to underscore it just wasn't on my radar. As a result, I completely understand these texts and the sender become public record and can be subjected to Oprah by the public. In addition, I'd like to share I inadvertently sent to Janine Wechter, the keeper of district records, when she asked for the text messages that I received on 8/22 during the board meeting. One of the texts included a text sent to a friend on my own personal phone on Wednesday, 8/23, not at the board meeting. It was a text I received about one's takeaway of the meeting on 8/22. I did not write the text, nor did I make any commentary on the content of the text. I merely sent it in jest. Should this be in error? In closing, I will continue to be transparent as I represent the community, staff, and students in Washington Township as your elected official serving on the Board of Education until 2025. Thank you.
Stacy. Two things. I watched the board meeting here on the 22nd. I was on vacation. And I watched the meeting, and when you first mentioned the text message, Ms. Chilla did not say anything. I mentioned the text message once. She didn't say anything. You repeatedly said it, so she said something to you. But you knew that my son texted me. I have it. I don't have it with me. I had it last week, because I know you keep talking about it, making a parallel. My son was watching, because he was part of the drama club, so he was watching the other kids come up and give their testimony, and he sent me a text and said, are you okay? Because he could tell that it was an emotional meeting, and it was just a testimony. I could read it. It was a testimony as to how he felt that Mr. Lawson was kind to him, and that, and that's all it was. And I just said to show the students, because we're here for the kids, that my son felt the same way. And I'm happy to share that. If anyone wants to see a text message from my child, I will share that to anyone.
And if I could just say something, because I was the board attorney that was sitting at the table that Ms. Baker just referred to. It's not my role as a board attorney to be the police of the electronic devices of board members. Board members are adults. Board members can text whoever the heck they want to. I don't care. But where I do care is when you conduct board business on your personal cell phone, board business that is the public's business, that then becomes a public record on your personal cell phone. That's where there's a problem. And where then there is an Oprah request for that board business on one's personal cell phone, one has an obligation to provide those complete text messages in their unadulterated form, so that the custodian of records, in this case Ms. Wechter, can properly record and maintain those public records. So, to be clear, any board member may use their cell phone however they'd like. To the extent you're using your board to conduct your personal device to conduct board business, your device may have to be reviewed to the extent that we get an Oprah request, and to the extent that the board's public records exist on you as a board member's personal device.
I'm just going to say one real quick thing. I think the image that we need to put forth is always one of class and dignity, and I'm going to take complete high road here, and I'm going to be a gentleman as I was raised. So that's the first thing. Second thing is that the main thing that I think board members have to always understand, one of their massive ethical principles is that they must support and protect school personnel. I'm going to just stop right there, because I think that it's important for people to watch and understand that we are a district that has manners and that we discuss children and where our children are going, which is to amazing places.
And I was not conducting board business. I was getting a text from my kid. I was a mom at that moment. I was a mother, and I will always be a mother, and that's it, and that's what it was. I'm happy to share that text with you, Connie.
Yeah, I just want to, Stacy, just address when you said I keep bringing it up. There was board business going on about the drama teacher and not being recommended for being the drama.
Ms. Baker, I would just caution you, because that employee has not been riced, and we shouldn't be talking about
Okay.
her employment.
All right, so my point is that a text message was mentioned. I'm not, board members can receive from their kids, bring me home a pizza after the meeting because you didn't cook dinner, okay? I'm not talking about that. I was just talking about the fact that it was during a discussion about a matter, and it was a text message, and nothing was said. That's all. And I don't want to belabor this. I just wanted to make my statement. I want to move forward. I own it. I made a mistake, and the motivation was not in any nefarious intention. Okay, it was definitely done to be productive, and obviously it didn't turn out that way. Thank you.
I just want to reiterate that was a child texting his mom, period. All right, any other new business? All right, motion to open to the public.
Second.
Dina Rosario?
Good evening. Scott, you mentioned religious holidays. I'm going to ask a rhetorical question. How many of you as board members and parents had to have their children choose between attending religious services on the day that they hold most holy or going to school? How many of your kids had to suffer with, hey, I'm missing 5 AP tests or 5 AP classes, where instruction is ongoing whether you're there or not? So while you are right that it is an excused holiday, which some years attendance records it easily, some years not so easily, it doesn't change the fact that my children had to choose between observing their holiday and attending school. None of the Christian students in this district None of the Christian administrators, teachers, staff have to choose to take a personal day to go to synagogue or church or mosque. None of the teachers, none of the students have to choose between going to clubs, activities, having fun activities, learning material, having review for tests, or taking tests. My children and other children in this district have to make that choice day in, day out, every year. There have been years that this district has given off for both Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Actually, let me change that. They've given off for students. They've made it an in-service day for teachers and staff, which means that those teachers still have to take a personal day to attend religious services. I would wager that most of you on this board have never had your children sit with you and say, I really want to go to services. It's my obligation as a Jew, but I also don't want to miss a test. How many of you have had to have that conversation with your children, or have had peers come to them and say, hey, why are you in school today? I thought it was an important day. Obviously it's not, because you're here. Now for me and my family, my children always choose services. That's what we've taught them. But for many, many Jews in this community, that's not the case. As I sat at synagogue, which is located a block up the street from here, I turned to the parents and said, where are the children? And time and again, it's too early in the school year. The younger children are afraid of getting in trouble. They don't understand what an excused absence is, and quite frankly, some of your teachers don't either. There are still tests being given. There is still homework. There are still activities being done. There are clubs. There are parties. There are everything you can imagine. It's a normal school day, except for those Jewish students that sit there and go, I'm here today because I have to learn, but I'm also not doing what's in my heart and what my beliefs tell me to do. I was at the last calendar committee where we looked at whether or not we're going to give off for Yom Kippur. Some of the people at the table were concerned that Easter Monday, which I don't believe is actually a religious holiday but used as a travel holiday, they didn't want to give that up because they wanted to be able to make sure that they could spend time with their family. That's great. You get off for a travel holiday. We don't get off for the day that's most sacred in our culture. Your teachers don't necessarily understand what the holidays are or what they can and can't do. Now, the vast majority of your teachers have been wonderful. When they're explain that my child won't be here or that they have to do things, they come up with creative ways to make it work. But that's still putting the onus on the children to figure out, okay, now I'm going to miss study hall, I'm going to miss lunch, I'm going to stay late to make up work that no other Christian student has to do. And Jews aren't the only one that face this. You have your Islamic students. You have students that celebrate Diwali. There's so many holidays, and we take for granted that we have off for Christmas. Ms. Baker, you started to say Christmas holiday when you first spoke and changed it to winter. We all know it's Christmas. We all know that that's why we have off, and that's okay. As long as we understand that there are other sacred holidays that this district should be giving off. Williamstown didn't have school yesterday. Those students said to my children, wait, I had off and I'm Christian because my district knew how important it was. You're Jewish and you still had to go to school? How do we allow that to happen year in, year out? The time that we did have off was when Josh Aronovich, a Jew, was on the board, or when Megan Watson, who is my children's godparent, was on the board. Other than that in the history, we don't give off. And it shouldn't be who you know. It shouldn't be that I have to call a principal and say, hey, there's an activity this day and that they have to reschedule it. This district should show all children that their religion and their faith is important. And we simply don't doing it. So telling us that it's a religious holiday and it's excused doesn't count for anything. Thank you.
Thank you, Dina.
Just to clarify, and I appreciate you bringing that up, I wanted people to be aware of the policy. That was one thing, because I think a lot of people weren't. But we also talked about kicking it to committee to look at this and see if there's other solutions forward. So
I wasn't sure how lesson planners or anything like that works in my district. We have one common lesson planner that has the dates in the calendar. Is there a way to put religious holidays in there? I'm just thinking short term because I think the longer term is making sure all students do feel like like they are a part of the school, just like Christian students, every religious student should feel that way. Every student should. But I'm thinking like short term, how do we focus on this year when we can't change the calendar? Can we put something in place to make it easier? Because teachers have a lot on their plates. If they don't have it in front of them where they're planning lessons, they might schedule tests for certain holidays where they have students. So I don't know if that's just something that we could talk about in IA or how that would work.
Yeah, we certainly could. We do not have a common lesson planner right now, right? No common way to do lesson plans. So that point is under development for next year. So, but we can talk about, and I agree with you in that I think every culture has special days, right? And I think the board has to decide which of those days that you can grant and which you can't. And I think that's always just a difficult conversation for everybody, because for you it would be, Yom Kippur or Rosh Hashanah. For others it might be Diwali. For others it might be Lunar New Year. It's a sea change, which can be discussed and absolutely should be. I do agree that tests and projects should not happen on that day. I'd have to double check and make sure that was accurate, that we gave tests, but I agree with you in that massive things should not be happening on that day. A big turn in, of substance. Totally agree.
Elaine? Yeah, I just want to thank Dr. Hibbs for quickly addressing our website about Rosh Hashanah.
Sure.
Thank you. Or Yom Kippur, I'm sorry, Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur.
And so which committee is going to go to IA? That's where you know that? Yeah? Okay. All right. And we'll look at the test aspects as well as, I mean, one of the things we could look at too is the impact, right? What other holidays and
for sure
would be the impact of the calendar.
Dr. Nathan, you have that? Thank you.
Heather Cueva?
Hi, I just wanted to announce here that you were trying to get together a meeting for our special education parent advisory group, and we do have a parent meeting we're trying to get set up at the library on October 5th at 6:30. So it'll be over at the Margaret Hagan Library, just for any parents who are interested in coming out to join the committee, to help plan the meetings and everything. And we are trying to move ahead, and we're working with the special ed department to get some open parent meetings set up on the schedule, so we should be announcing them soon.
Could you tell us again, what's the date?
October 5th.
What time?
At 6:30 at the Hagan
Put
Library.
that like on our splash page or?
No, actually, I dropped off the paperwork over it there, because this is just like an informal meeting with just parents.
Okay.
So that way we can try to get interest
You got it.
together, so that way, to help with getting some new people onto the committee to help represent some of the schools.
You got it.
Patricia Klein?
There were a couple questions that were asked about the salary that I did. I got it from salary.com, August 27th, 2023. So they are recent numbers. Also, someone asked a question about being concerned about the children. When we have the contract that said September the 1st, that was the deadline, we are trying to teach our children to be accountable and responsible. When you don't agree with a policy, you make some changes. That's why I'm here, because I want to discuss policy 5756, transgender student policy. So I want to bring everybody up to par as to what it says in this policy. It prohibits school officials from telling parents when a student expresses any gender identity issues. Number 2, requires schools to change the names in the school database to the child's preferred name. Mandates that students use bathrooms and locker rooms according to the gender they identify with. requires that sports teams, clubs, or activities accept students based on the gender they identify with, requires sexual education classes to be separated based on gender identity. Let me just state this is a policy, it's not a law, it's not mandated. According to the Chief Deputy Attorney General, James Michael, he said it is not mandated. So my question is Washington Township School District following this policy, 5756? There are some school districts in New Jersey have decided not to follow the policy and have decided to revise the policy. And they have in their notification in their policy that parental notification would take place if changes mandate student records, if utilizing the restroom or locker room of a gender with which the student identifies only if this restroom is different from the gender assigned at birth. Participation in a sports club activity regularly associated with one's gender identity and expression rather than one's gender assigned at birth. When referred to outside counseling, if the need for counseling arises from the student's transgender status, all of these, they're going to let the parents know. When otherwise required by law, such as anti-bullying Bill of Rights, where districts must inform parents of the nature of any bullying. So if they are being bullied because of transgender issues, the parents will be notified. Like I said, several districts have adapted this, have changed their policies, and we can do the same. So tonight I want to challenge the board members right here. I need somebody to motion and take a second motion and vote tonight to revise the policy 5756 like other New Jersey school districts have done. So that's your challenge tonight. Thank you.
So I can say that policy 5756 is approved and it's enacted in our schools. We are following the guidance of the Department of Education, and there's probably a lot of opinions, but my opinion is that we need to support and protect each and every one of our kids because they deserve that and they absolutely need that, and that is our one massive goal. And you know, the boards of education, and there's been recent developments on this, but the ones that initially changed this and changed it massively got hit with injunctions left, right, and center, which I don't think are done in any way, shape, or form. So, you know, my goal as your superintendent is to make sure that all of our kids are safe, protected, and you don't have to agree with everything because that's not what we need to be, you know. Dina spoke very passionately about Jewish holidays. I respect Dina. Even if I can't grant her wish, I understand. I can be empathetic with her wish. However, our job is to make sure that we understand that our job is to protect all of our kids, each and every one.
I just have a quick question. I understand the policy, but the part that I don't understand is that the parents are not made aware. Because when there are any other issues, be a health issue, my son was diabetic, if he had low blood sugar or something happened, we got a phone call. I don't understand where the separation of parents' rights to know is. So that's my question. I have no problem with the policy except for parental rights, knowing what's happening with their child. They are the parent. They are responsible for that child until they turn 18. That's my question.
You want to start?
Yeah, and look, Mrs. Clancy, you make great points. And the one thing that we're going to have with this issue is we're always going to have disagreement because not everybody's going to agree. But with that said, we are obligated to follow the directives and guidance from the DOE. The school districts that changed the policies recently, Middletown, Manalapan, and Marlboro, were hit with injunctions by Attorney General Matt Plotkin, and the court in Monmouth County Superior Court pretty much immediately issued restraining order injunctive relief, stopping those policies from being put in place. So to the extent that the district or the board has an issue or a concern with regard to the policy, or generally speaking, the direction that things seem to be going in the state, my suggestion, strong suggestion, would be to contact your local legislators so that they can be your voice in Trenton, so that when the DOE puts out their next guidance, it may be a little different than its current guidance. But with that being said, I can also say that I've been involved in situations where we have had, not necessarily in this district, but suicidal students who are dealing with transgender, gender identity issues that if their parents found out, they would, potentially harm themselves. And so I think each situation really deserves its own look. It's not a one-size-fits-all situation. We may have students that have issues at home that may need to get help with at school so that they can come up with a plan to, deal with it with their parents. But, as of this moment, unless and until we're told otherwise by the DOE, I'm assuming that this district will continue to follow the DOE guidance.
Thank you.
Adam, that's in court, right? Like the injunction restraint, like it's basically going to be tied up for a couple of years while they fight it out in court, right?
It'll be litigated. This is not the end of it. I think, if you were to ask me what do I think would happen, I think what would happen is that you'd have to have the different mindsets or opinions or viewpoints kind of come together to try and come up with something that is, you're never going to get everything that you want, but at least somewhat more acceptable than things are now. I think also there's going to be a push from the legislature one way or another that will probably inform the DOE's position. But I don't see anything, there being any major changes within at least this school year. I'm just not seeing it yet. As of this moment, I don't think any changes are coming anytime soon.
Aren't they also trying to sue those districts for legal fees and things of that nature? I thought I read about that too.
I'm not sure about the legal fee aspect of it. I would say though that the fight is on. I mean, there's no question about it. The fight is on. It's in the courts now, and it'll be there for a while.
So I wanted to speak from a parent perspective, but also, from a student perspective, a teacher perspective, thinking about students. The parent perspective has to do with all the avenues that we have to see what our children can do. Like I know I monitor my kids' devices like crazy, probably to the point where they're absolutely thinking that I'm the worst possible parent. I'm sure a lot of us are in the same boat. I have a lot of communication with my kids. I feel like that's the goal. And I feel like it's easier than ever now to see where your child is and to talk to them. And there's so many ways to talk about what's going on because they're exposed to things that are outside the school's control. And when it's brought in the home, it becomes part of the parent's job to figure out. And I believe in parents, and I believe in their relationships with kids. I also believe in teachers' relationships with kids. And I think that if this dwindles down far enough, it could become an issue where teachers are then put on the spot to inform parents of something that maybe a child has told them in confidence. And as a 20-plus year educator, I never, ever want to say that I'm the reason that a student harms themselves because they didn't feel safe at home. I never want that put on my shoulders. I can't imagine any other teacher would want that. It's too frightening of a prospect. I think we have to think of those scenarios before we make blanket decisions that affect all students.
Thank you, Kathleen.
That's very well spoken. And I think the part too that shouldn't be missed here, and I think this is sometimes lost in where we are in the world, in America today, is that you can't be here, you're here, right? There are, if you're a parent and you're having conversations with your children, it's not as if that we have hundreds of children that parents aren't having conversations with. I just want to make sure I really hammer that home, is that piece is super important, and we're not saying that conversations shouldn't take place, and do. I talk to my 3 kids about everything, right? Everything and everything. So I want to be very clear that we're not saying that conversations shouldn't take place, but there's concerns about safety of our children.
Mary Beth? Mary.
I wrote transparency. I know you, Dr. Hibbs answered my first question, which I am in the public, so my text was, thank you for asking that question. So the first question, he did answer that. But the second question was to the board, and how about opening up to the people out in TV land the opportunity to ask questions at open public? It's something to think about. Nobody discussed that, and there was no back and forth. So I just want to know where you stand on that. And as far as, I think the biggest concern with what Patricia was talking about, and I know other districts, and I know it's becoming, litigation and all that, where do they draw the line with all students? And I don't disagree with anybody's comments up here, because I talk to my kids. I've always talked to my children. But you have certain children who are a little bit more quiet and maybe can be a little bit more influenced, and depending on your teacher or your administrator, that can sometimes become an issue. And we're all aware of it. It's not just, it maybe isn't everybody, but it can happen. So you have to think of that, and I think parents do kind of worry, is something being said? And most parents would do everything and anything to protect their child and make sure the child's happy. At least that's my takeaway. So I think that's why the concern is so much about taking away what a child says to a parent. There can't be that much that it's secretive, and that the teacher's going to hear something that the parent's not supposed to, I guess is my opinion. It is still an adult. So, but I just wanted to add that on. But my big question, and what I want an answer to, is, will you even consider it, opening it up for the public that's out in TV land to ask questions during meetings? Thanks.
It's a really great idea that you have, Mayor. I think the only problem that and I really wouldn't even consider it a problem, I think it would just be, how could we regulate it? Because our public session you think about it, if we have 100 people watching, everybody wants to ask a question, we could be here for 2.5 hours. So I don't know if there could be a process to where maybe if the comment section gets opened, and we find the most common questions that are asked, almost like a forum type, and then maybe answer the questions in that regard. But I just don't see how you would be able to, I'm going to use a word, I'm going to say limit how many questions we can have asked at a certain time. But I kind of agree with you that, again, for the people, it might be difficult for them to get to meetings. I do like the idea, but the question would be how to regulate it to where we're not sitting here for 3 hours going through questions like live as our meetings are going on right now.
Well, I was not back and forth, but like I suggested, look at the first 5 questions, and then someone who's over here can monitor and kind of combine stuff. Also, when I was talking before with Patricia, Cherry Hill, they do it, Voorhees does it, so maybe somebody should go out and watch their meetings, so if they have an understanding. This is transparent, everybody has an understanding.
No, I agree with that.
No, I'm not opposed to it.
No.
I think we set the parameters in committee.
Correct. Yeah.
So how about, let's bring Carol in the loop, and let's push it to policy for a conversation.
Also, great points from Mrs. Bem and also from Mr. Lindsay. Is there some way that we might want to consider getting in touch with Cherry Hill? I'm sure they had to work a lot of this stuff out. Why reinvent the wheel if they're already doing it? And, I'm pretty proud of the fact that we have a pretty good turnout. I remember being at board meetings when there were 2 or 3 people. And if you look at how many people are viewing our board meetings, they've gone from 200 to thousands. So people are watching, and the more we can bring people in and be transparent, I think is a good thing. And, things have changed now. We have technology that we didn't have before. You had to come to a meeting. But now we have technology, and I think it's pretty interesting that there are districts that are already doing it, and it'd be helpful to know what they went through, because they probably have they probably spent a lot of time before they implemented it. Just a suggestion to consider.
Yeah, we could certainly reach out. I think that should all flow through policy, right? Let's do some action plans and sketch it out. I'm going to guess that some of them just kept it through COVID. That would be my guess, but that's just a guess. They probably just didn't change it back.
Can you check into it?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Kevin, you're up again. Thank you.
It's the last time I'm ever here, period.
That's okay. We're glad you're getting up to talk.
Did you?
Yeah, I was going to say, it's Duduque, right?
Duduque, yeah.
Not Duduque.
Duduque, D-I-D-U-C-H.
All right, thank you.
Please, call me Kevin, that's fine. Just procedurally, with regards to the notion the board should open it up for a vote on policy 5657 and vote on it. It's clearly not in your agenda, not to do your job, Ari, but you guys couldn't vote on it anyway, even if you wanted to, because it hasn't been publicly noticed. Even if you did vote on it, I'd probably consider doing some more homework in terms of what the ramifications are. Forget the lawyers and the legal fees, because we're always going to be out there, God help us. My point is for you to maybe this board could conduct some sort of a study or an investigation or committee in place to evaluate what could go into a possible amendment of this policy based on public feedback, based upon, I don't know, science and information. I can tell you from my personal perspective, if I polled the little people in my house, my daughter, she's not really aware of transgender kids or any of the other heartaches that some of those kids really face. Her number one concern is, do they or do they not like the Ninja Turtles? It's literally all she cares about. Are they good kids? That's what she cares about. But it would be cool, and I'll volunteer, be part of the volunteer committee or whatever it is you guys end up doing, to figure out, is there a way to effectively amend that policy if it could be done? And I'm not even barking for it. That was everything that I had. Thanks again.
Thanks,
Any other comments?
So, well, I'll start out there on that one. Is that something that we could or should look at in policy? Relative to, and probably with Adam's support of what types of things would even be amendable?
Yeah, certainly to the extent the board wants to look at the policy, I can help guide you through to ensure that we're sticking with, to the best extent possible or greatest extent possible, the DOE guidance so that we don't have issues. But without sitting down and having kind of on the one side the guidance from the DOE and the other side your policy, and kind of looking at the two to see where there's harmony or disharmony, it'd be hard for me to say as I sit here now. But certainly that's something that I'm happy to do, without question. Yeah.
I want to clarify one more thing too, because people make connections, and I want to make sure that I'm crystal clear on this. My former district was Marlboro Township Public Schools. Marlboro Township Public Schools was one of the school districts that was slapped with the injunction and changed this policy. I had nothing to do with that. I just want to be very crystal clear, and I actually removed myself from the meetings that were occurring while I still worked there. I just want to be crystal clear on that.
Just a quick comment. If we were to teach kids from the get-go to be kind and judge people for who they are inside and not what's outside, things would be a lot better in our schools.
Kindness matters.
Kindness does matter.
That's the truth.
Marcy Dewey.
Hi, sorry, I'm going to still continue with this conversation. So I read the policy because I'm one of those crazy people. And I had a question because I'll read the sentence to you so you guys can hear it. It says, there is no affirmative duty for any school district staff member to notify a student's parent or of the student's gender identity or expression, right? That's right in the policy. So what happens if a parent calls and asks the teacher just out of fluke? Like the policy doesn't state what happens then. So I guess that's what my question is.
You're asking what would happen?
No, yeah, like, what does the teacher do in that instance? And then my other piece to this is, reading the policy, it kind of says, hey, we'll lie for you, don't worry about it. And that's the part I don't like about the policy. It's kind of like the principal brings the student in and explains the whole situation and says, look, you know, we have your back, but, you know, another parent could tell your mom or your dad or whoever, another student, or it could be revealed at an event. Like, the policy just seems like you're telling students, hey, you know, we'll keep your secrets, don't worry. And that makes a lot of parents uneasy. And I think that's a lot of the problem. So then I don't know if there's any other secrets that are being kept either.
Good question.
So, and that's all I got.
Not on my watch. So the first one, to be honest, in all my years as a superintendent and principal, I've never had that come as an actual thing that happened. I can probably pontificate in what I think would happen there, and I have some building principals that might maybe be able to give me a nod. If that did happen, I'm sure teachers would want to always do the right thing, because teachers really always want to do the right thing. They really do. And education is becoming progressively harder in a lot of ways. I think the first thing they would do is they would go down and ask guidance from their building principal about what they should say to that parent and how we could assist. So I think, and then we would work in the best way possible to work with the parent to have the conversations that we felt were appropriate. Obviously, if a child was ever in imminent danger, that's something that would be told immediately. If there's knowledge of harm from either themselves or others, we have processes for that. But to my knowledge, those conversations, that hasn't happened, because normally if a super important event happens like that, I usually get phone calls immediately. That's A. The second part of that, I think the spirit of that, and I don't have it in front of me because my computer's freezing up. I think the spirit of that language, Marcy, is it's not that we're going to keep your secret and not tell parents. That portion, I think, is if there's an outside investigation, for instance, like an HIB, that we are mandated to do certain things, and through the course of that investigation, it's going to point to something that we should be having conversations with the child, and then, if appropriate, parents or guardians, just to make sure that we're supporting the child correctly. I think the concept of that, and correct me if you think I'm wrong, it's to protect the child, and if there's a document that's going to go home to parents, that we work with the child and assist the child and help the child through that.
Yeah, and look, I'm not an educator, I'm a school attorney, but I usually am the one that gets these calls from the superintendents. And so, you know, the preference, as far as I'm concerned, is always to try and work with the student to come up with a plan that's acceptable to the student, get the student's buy-in, so that we can go to the parents to have the conversations that needed to be had. But again, it's doing it at the student's pace. It's doing it kind of in a scaffolded, structured manner with an experienced and seasoned counselor that can help the student work through the issue. Because it is, you know, look, it may not be a big deal to us, but it's everything to the student. And so that's the level of recognition that I think that this district has when it comes to these types of issues.
And I think, of course, as parents, we want to know what's going on with our kids. I mean, I've worked in education for close to 30 years now, and I've seen and heard things that have made me physically sick, cry, still have nightmares about, that, you know, we have to really protect our kids, and we have to just make sure that our kids are safe. You know, not all parents are, you know, as open or accepting, and I think, like Adam said, we work with the kids to get them to that point, but there are things that goes on that would make your head spin, and I don't want to admit that happened, but happened. I've seen way too often, so I think we just have to be mindful and put the kids first. That's all.
There are no more cards, so I'm going to make a motion to close to public.
So moved.
And I'm going to make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved. Second.
Meeting adjourned.
I didn't promote the event.